The first time I heard the scream, I dismissed it as the wind. Up here, in the shadow of Twin Peaks, the wind howls like a banshee. A constant, mournful cry that plays tricks on your ears. I'd been a fire lookout for 3 seasons, stationed in the old Osprey Point Tower, and I thought I'd heard every sound these mountains could make. I was wrong. It was late September, the air crisp with the coming autumn. The aspens a brilliant, fiery gold against the dark pines. The summer haze had vanished, and the peaks stood out in sharp, brutal detail against the endless blue sky. That's when the first call came over the radio. A hiker, overdue. Not unusual. People underestimate these mountains all the time. But then another call came. And another. A family of 4 vanished from their campsite near Emerald Lake. All their gear was still their tent. Sleeping bags, even a pot of half-cooked chili hanging over a cold fire pit. They were just gone. Search and rescue set up a base camp. Their bright orange jackets a stark contrast to the deep greens and browns of the forest. I watched them through my binoculars, a small army of determined figures combing the trails. Days turned into a week. The mood shifted from hopeful to grim. The nights grew longer, colder, and the sounds started. At first, it was that high-pitched scream. Closer this time, echoing off the granite faces of the peaks. It wasn't the wind. It was a sound of pure, abject terror. A sound that made the hairs on my arms stand up and a cold dread snake its way down my spine. Then came the whispers, feigned at first, carried on the breeze. They sounded like my name, stretched and distorted, a hollow, rasping sound that seemed to come from all directions at once. I tried to convince myself it was exhaustion, the isolation playing with my mind. I'd spent countless nights alone up here, but this felt different. This felt like I wasn't alone anymore. One evening, as the sun bled out behind the mountains, casting long, skeletal shadows across the valley, I saw it. I was scanning the ridgeline to the east, just below Twin Peaks, when a flicker of movement caught my eye. It was too fast, too fluid to be a deer or an elk. I focused my binoculars, my heart hammering against my ribs. What I saw, it didn't make sense. It was tall, impossibly so, and thin, like a dead tree stripped of its bark. Its limbs were long and angular, moving with a jerky, unnatural grace as it picked its way through the scree. Its color was the pale, sickly white of bone, bleached by the sun. It stopped and turned its head, and even from that distance, I felt a chilling sense of being watched, of Bang Sheen. There was a dark, hollow space where a face should be, a void that seemed to suck in the fading light. I dropped the binoculars, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I didn't sleep that night. Every gust of wind was the sound of it climbing the tower stairs. Every creak of the old wooden structure was the sound of its long fingers testing the door. The next morning, the radio crackled to life. It was Sheriff Miller. His voice was strained, heavy with a fatigue that went beyond lack of sleep. "We're pulling the search," he said, calling it off. There's nothing left to find." I asked him what he meant. There was a long silence on the other end, filled only with static. "We found some tracks," he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. "They don't match any known animal, and we found things. Scattered, torn clothing. A backpack." He paused again. "It's not a bear, son. Whatever's out there, it's something else." After he signed off, a profound silence fell over the tower, heavier and more menacing than any storm. The search teams packed up and left, their orange jackets disappearing down the winding mountain road, leaving me truly alone with the peaks and the creeping dread. The beautiful, majestic mountains I had loved now felt like a prison, and I was trapped inside with a monster from the darkest of nightmares. That night, the whispers came back, louder, more insistent. They weren't just calling my name anymore. They were promises of warmth in the freezing air, of company in the crushing loneliness. They spoke of an end to hunger, annoying, insatiable hunger I hadn't even realized I was feeling. I barricaded the door with my cot and the supply chest, my hands clumsy with fear. The temperature plummeted. and frost began to creep across the inside of the window panes. Through a small, clear patch, I stared out into the oppressive darkness, and then I heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping, not on the door, but on the glass, 60 feet above the ground. Tap, tap, tap. My blood ran cold. I couldn't bring myself to look up to see the source of the sound. The tapping stopped, replaced by a low, scraping noise, like fingernails, dragging slowly down the glass. A long, pale finger, more like a gnarled branch, traced a line in the frost, its tip leaving a dark, wet trail. I huddled in the corner, clutching the fire axe. The only weapon I had. The whispers were inside my head now, a chorus of despair and ravenous desire. It knew my fears. It spoke of my family, of my regrets, of every dark thought I'd ever had. It was trying to break me, to hollow me out from the inside. The scraping on the window continued for what felt like an eternity, a slow, patient torture. Then, a new sound, the groaning of stressed metal. I looked up at the trapdoor in the ceiling that led to the exterior catwalk. It was bowing inward, the thick steel bolts straining against an immense, unseen pressure. A fine dust of rust and paint flakes rained down on me. With a horrifying shriek of tearing metal, one of the bolts snapped, then another. I scrambled for the radio, my fingers fumbling with the dial. Mayday, Mayday, Osprey Point Tower. Something's trying to get in. It's on the roof. My voice was a choked, pathetic squeak. The only reply was a burst of static, followed by a faint, distorted whisper that came through the speaker. It was my own voice, twisted into a mocking, hungry rasp, with a final deafening crack. The trapdoor ripped free from its hinges and was thrown aside. For a moment, there was only the black, star-filled sky. Then, a shape descended, unfolding itself into the cramped space of the lookout tower. It was skeletal, its gray, taut skin stretched over a frame that was all wrong, all sharp angles and impossible length. Its head tilted, and from the deep, shadowed pits of its eyes, an ancient, malevolent intelligence stared right through me. A foul stench filled the room, the smell of decay and frozen earth. It opened its mouth, a jagged, lipless tear in its face, and a sound emerged, not a roar, but a dry, rattling hiss that mimicked the whispers, the scream, and the wind all at once. It was the sound of utter starvation. I didn't scream, primera, could, und. All I could do was stare into the abyss that had come for me. This is my last entry. I'm broadcasting this on a loop. Don't come looking. Don't come to Twin Peaks. The hunger is eternal, and the mountains are its home. It's always watching, always. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. We've got some incredible stories lined up for you today that I seriously can't wait to share. But before we dive into all that, I'm super curious about something. Where in the world are you watching this from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And just for fun, let me know what time it is for you. It's always so amazing to see how our community spans across so many different time zones. It really feels like we're all connected, no matter where we are. All right, let's get into it. The rustle of leaves in a quiet forest can be soothing. But what if that sound isn't the wind? What if it's something mimicking the wind, waiting for you to let your guard down? My story starts on a solo camping trip, something I'd done 100 times before. I found a perfect clearing deep in the woods of northern Arizona, miles from any trail. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples, I felt that familiar sense of peace. The only sounds were the crackle of my campfire and the gentle hum of the wilderness settling in for the night. But as darkness fell, a new sound joined the chorus, a soft whisper, like a voice carried on the breeze. But it felt wrong. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just the wind playing tricks on my ears. But the feeling of being watched was undeniable. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, a primal instinct screaming that I was not alone. The whispering grew more distinct. It wasn't words I could understand, but a series of clicks and soft whistles, almost like a strange bird. I scanned the tree line, my heart pounding in my chest. Nothing. Just the endless dark shapes of pine trees against the star-filled sky. I threw another log on the fire, the flames leaping up and pushing the darkness back a few precious feet. For a moment, the whispering stopped, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Maybe it really was just an animal. But then, I heard a twig snap, not far from my camp, just beyond the ring of firelight. It was a heavy, deliberate sound, not a deer or a rabbit. This was something big. I grabbed the heavy-duty flashlight I always kept clipped to my belt and pointed its beam into the darkness. The light cut through the night, illuminating tree trunks and tangled undergrowth, but the woods remained still and empty. The silence that followed was somehow more terrifying than the sounds had been. It was a heavy, expectant silence, as if the entire forest was holding its breath, waiting. I stayed frozen like that for what felt like an eternity, sweeping the beam of my flashlight back and forth, my ears straining for any sound. Nothing. I started to think maybe I was just spooked, my imagination running wild in the isolated darkness. I tried to calm my racing heart, focusing on the warmth of the fire. Then, I heard it again. This time, it was a voice, my voice. It called out from the darkness, a perfect imitation. "Is anyone out there?" it asked. The same words I'd been tempted to shout moments before. A cold dread washed over me, so intense it felt like ice water flooding my veins. This wasn't an echo. It was a mimicry. It was something in the trees, repeating my own thoughts, my own fears, back to me. I scrambled for my pack, my mind screaming to get out, to run. But where could I go? I was miles from my car, in the middle of a forest that now felt like a cage. The voice called out again, this time with a hint of laughter in it. A chilling, mocking sound that was mine, but twisted and malevolent. I knew I couldn't run blindly into the night. That's what it wanted. My only defense was the fire. I spent the rest of the night feeding it, making it roar as high and bright as I could. The whispering and clicking continued intermittently from the shifting shadows just beyond the light's reach. Several times, I heard the sound of something heavy circling my camp, always staying just out of sight. It was toying with me, testing my resolve. The most terrifying moment came just before dawn, when the fire was beginning to die down. From the edge of the clearing, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. It was the frantic barking of a dog, a sound of pure terror. And then, abruptly, the barking was cut off, replaced by a wet, tearing sound, followed by a sickening crack, then silence again. A few minutes later, the whispering started once more, but this time it was mixed with a new sound, the low, guttural whine of a wounded animal. It was a lure, a trap. It was trying to draw me out with a sound of distress. I stayed huddled by the embers, my entire body trembling, until the first rays of sunlight pierced through the canopy. With the arrival of dawn, the forest fell silent. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the woods once again seemed peaceful. But I knew it was a lie. As soon as it was bright enough to see, I packed my things with frantic speed, not daring to look too closely at the tree line. I didn't run, but I walked faster than I ever have in my life, constantly looking over my shoulder, my ears straining for the slightest unnatural sound. I didn't stop, not for water, not for rest, until I burst out of the woods and saw my car gleaming in the sunlight. I've never been so relieved to see a piece of metal in my life. I threw my gear in the back, jumped in, and locked the doors. As I sped away down the dirt road, leaving a cloud of dust behind me, I glanced in my rearview mirror. For just a second, I thought I saw a tall, gaunt figure standing at the edge of the trees, its form blurry and indistinct. It was just standing there. What king may go? I never went back to that part of the forest, and I don't think I'll ever camp alone again. Sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I think I can hear a faint whisper, a distant click. People talk about skinwalkers, about ancient legends of beings that can imitate any sound, any voice, to lure their victims. I used to think they were just stories, campfire tales meant to spook tourists. But after that night, I know better. I know that there are things in the deep woods that defy explanation. Things that watch and wait and listen. They learn your voice. They learn your fears. and they echo them back at you from the darkness between the trees. So if you ever find yourself alone in the wilderness and you hear something that sounds a little too familiar, don't call back. Just pray for the sun to rise. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe for more tales from the edge of the unknown. Stay safe out there. The old museum smelled of dust and forgotten time, a scent I'd grown used to over 6 months on the grave shift. My name is Leo, and I was the sole guardian of small-town history from midnight to sunrise. It was an easy gig. The only real excitement was the occasional mouse skittering across the polished floor. That is, until the winter deepened, and the snow piled up outside like frozen waves. It started subtly. I'd be on my first round, a thermos of black coffee in hand, and I'd notice something. Oof. The Indigenous Peoples exhibit was my favorite. It was a quiet, respectful corner of the museum, filled with beautiful beadwork, arrowheads, and a collection of ceremonial masks. One night, I noticed a hand-carved hunting spear, usually parallel to the wall, was angled slightly. I straightened it, thinking the morning crew must have bumped it. The next night, it was angled again, this time toward the large window that looked out over the Blackwood forest. I chuckled, blaming the old building's vibrations. A week later, it wasn't just the spear. A row of arrowheads, once fanned out in a neat semicircle, were now all aligned, their sharp flint tips pointing directly at that same window. Forest. A cold knot formed in my stomach. This was no longer a coincidence. I started taking pictures at the beginning of my shift, just to prove I wasn't losing my mind. Every morning, the photos confirmed it. The artifacts were moving, slowly, methodically. Everything in that exhibit was reorienting itself to face the woods. The centerpiece of the collection was a ceremonial mask, carved from ancient, dark wood. Its face was gaunt, with hollowed eyes and a mouth stretched in a silent, agonizing howl. The plaque called it a representation of the winter spirit of famine. The local elders rarely spoke of it, but whispers in town called it by another name. A Wendigo mask. I'd always found it unsettling, but now a primal fear clung to it. The mask, which always faced forward, had started to turn just a fraction of an inch each night, but its hollow gaze was slowly drifting towards the window, towards the forest. I started spending more time watching the security monitors, my eyes glued to the camera in the Indigenous exhibit. I'd fast forward through hours of footage, seeing nothing. The movements were too slow, too patient for the camera to catch. The unease grew into a quiet dread that gnawed at me through the long, silent hours. The winter winds howled outside, sounding less like wind and more like a mournful cry. I began to feel watched. The feeling was strongest near the big window, as if something was standing just beyond the tree line, staring back at me. One night, the first heavy blizzard of the season hit. The world outside the museum walls vanished into a swirling vortex of white. I was sealed in. That night, the feeling of being watched was unbearable. Around 2 a.m., a loud crack echoed from the exhibit hall. My heart leaped into my throat. Grabbing my heavy-duty flashlight, I crept out of the security office. The air in the hallway was unnaturally cold, my breath pluming in front of me. As I rounded the corner to the exhibit, I saw it. The glass case holding the mask was shattered. Shards glittered on the floor like jagged ice. The mask was gone. Panic seized me. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting wildly through the darkness. Where could it go? My radio was useless in the storm. I was completely alone. My light finally fell on the large window overlooking the forest, and there, pressed against the inside of the frosty pane, was a handprint. But it wasn't human. It was too long. The fingers impossibly thin, tipped with what looked like blackened claws. The print was already starting to fade as the glass frosted over again. I backed away slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. A low scratching sound started at the far end of the hole. Scrape. Scrape. Drag. It was the sound of something heavy being pulled across the floor. Something with sharp edges. I pointed my light down the corridor. At the very edge of the beam, I saw the tip of the hunting spear, scraping along the polished wood. It was moving on its own, sliding away from me, leading the way towards the museum's back exit, the door that led directly to the snow-choked forest. All the artifacts were on the move now. The arrowheads skittered across the floor like insects. The ceremonial rattles shook with a dry, deathly hiss. They were all heading for the back door, a slow, macabre procession drawn by an unseen force. And at the head of this parade, hovering impossibly in the air, was the Wendigo mask. Its hollow eyes seemed to burn with a faint, cold light, and the silent scream on its carved lips felt deafening in the silence. It turned, just for a second, and its empty gaze locked onto me. I felt a hunger in that look, an ancient, bottomless starvation that chilled me to my very soul. I didn't think, just ran. I sprinted in the opposite direction, toward the main entrance. The scraping and hissing grew louder behind me, faster. I fumbled with the heavy brass handles of the front doors, my fingers numb with cold and fear. The storm was a wall of white, but it was better than what was behind me. I burst out into the blizzard, the wind tearing at me, the snow blinding me. I didn't look back. I just ran, plunging into the storm, not knowing where I was going, only knowing I had to get away from the museum. I stumbled through the snow for what felt like hours, guided only by instinct. By some miracle, I found the main road and a passing snowplow picked me up just before dawn. I told the police a crazy story about a break-in, about a thief who was freakishly strong and stole a bunch of artifacts. They didn't believe me, but they couldn't explain the shattered case or the missing items. I quit my job that day. I packed a bag and drove until the snow turned to rain and the pine trees turned to palms. Sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls just right, I think about that museum. I think about those artifacts, marching out into the forest, called home by whatever was waiting for them in the trees. And I think about that mask, with its hollow eyes and its silent, hungry scream. I didn't see what it was leading them to, and I don't ever want to. Some things aren't meant to be exhibited. Some things are meant to be left alone, buried deep in the winter woods, and forgotten. Thanks for listening, and if you enjoyed this story, make sure to follow for more Tales from the Shadows.
The house was always quiet at night, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, like a blanket smothering every sound. It was just after 2 a.m, and my throat was sandpaper dry. I slipped out of bed, trying my best not to wake my husband Mark, who was sleeping soundly beside me. The floorboards in our old farmhouse creaked with every step, a familiar song in the dead of night. As I made my way down the hallway toward the kitchen, a sliver of moonlight cut through the living room window, casting long, distorted shadows that danced like ghostly figures. I'd always had a vivid imagination, something Mark often teased me about, but tonight, the shadows seemed different, more menacing. I pushed the thought away, blaming it on being half asleep. The kitchen was at the back of the house, and as I turned the corner, I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the oppressive silence. Standing by the kitchen sink, silhouetted against the pale glow of the moon filtering through the window, was a figure. It wasn't Mark. This figure was tall, impossibly so, its limbs elongated and thin, bent at angles that were just wrong. It was hunched over, its head cocked to one side as if listening to something I couldn't hear. I couldn't see its face, just the dark, jagged outline of its form. A primal fear, cold and sharp, pierced through me. My mind screamed at me to run, to scream, to do anything, but my body was paralyzed. Every horror story I'd ever heard, every campfire tale about things that lurk in the dark, flooded my mind. And one word echoed louder than the rest: Skinwalker. We lived in a remote area, surrounded by dense woods and ancient folklore. The locals, mostly old-timers, spoke in hushed tones about creatures that could mimic sounds, shapes, and even people. They said if you ever saw one, you should never let it know you saw it. That was the one rule. Acknowledging it was an invitation, a challenge. And right now, that was the only thought keeping my legs from collapsing. So I did the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I acted. I let out a soft yawn, rubbing my eyes as if I were still groggy with sleep. I walked past the living room entrance, my eyes fixed on the floor, and headed straight for the small bathroom next to our bedroom instead of the kitchen. My every move felt staged, robotic. I could feel its presence, a cold spot in the air, a silent weight that seemed to follow me. I didn't dare look back. I just had to pretend I was on a normal, sleepy trip to the bathroom. Inside the bathroom, I quietly locked the door, my hand trembling so hard I could barely turn the knob. I sank to the floor, pressing my back against the cool wood, trying to silence my ragged breaths. I didn't turn on the light. I just sat there in the dark, listening. The house was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence now. It was the silence of something holding its breath, waiting. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Had it seen me? Did it know I was faking? My mind raced, replaying the image of that grotesque figure by the sink. Its unnatural posture, the way its long fingers seemed to drum silently against the countertop. It wasn't human, I was sure of it. I stayed huddled on the bathroom floor for what felt like hours, too terrified to move. Eventually, the first faint hints of dawn started to paint the sky outside the tiny bathroom window. With the first rays of sunlight, a fragile sense of courage returned. I slowly, cautiously unlocked the door and peeked out. The hallway was empty. The living room was just a living room again, the shadows gone. I crept back toward our bedroom, my heart still pounding. Mark was still asleep, oblivious. I slipped back into bed, pulling the covers up to my chin, but sleep was impossible. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sun to rise fully. When Mark finally woke up, he looked at me, his brow furrowed with concern. "Beck, you look like you've seen a ghost. Are you okay?" I wanted to tell him. I wanted to scream and cry and tell him we needed to leave, to pack our bags and never look back. But how could I? How could I explain that I saw a monster from a folktale standing in our kitchen? He'd think I was crazy, that I'd had a nightmare, so I forced a weak smile. "Just a bad dream," I lied, my voice hollow. I couldn't get back to sleep. He accepted it, kissing my forehead before getting up to start the coffee. I listened to his familiar footsteps heading to the kitchen, the same path I had tried to take just hours before. My whole body tensed. I heard the coffee maker gurgle to life, the clink of a mug, all the normal morning sounds. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Maybe it was a dream. A vivid, terrifyingly real waking dream. I tried to convince myself of that all day. We went about our routine, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every creak of the house made me jump. Every shadow in the corner of my eye sent a fresh wave of panic through me. I kept the lights on all day, even in bright sunlight, and I found myself constantly glancing over my shoulder. That evening, as dusk began to settle, the familiar dread returned, heavier than before. Mark was in the barn, finishing up some chores. I was in the kitchen, trying to distract myself by preparing dinner when I heard it, a soft tapping sound. It was coming from the back door, the one in the kitchen. Tap, tap, tap. It was slow, deliberate. My blood ran cold. I stood frozen, knife in hand, staring at the door. It was locked. I knew it was. I had checked it a dozen times. But the tapping continued, rhythmic and patient, then a voice. It was a man's voice, raspy and low, almost a whisper. "Beck? Honey, can you let me in? I seem to have forgotten my keys." It sounded almost like Mark, almost, but the pitch was slightly off, the cadence wrong. It was like a bad imitation, a recording played at the wrong speed. My heart leaped into my throat. Mark was in the barn. I could see the barn light from the kitchen window. He was out there. He had his keys. I was sure of it. The tapping stopped. A new sound started, a faint scratching at the bottom of the door, like an animal wanting to be let in. I backed away slowly, my eyes glued to the door, my knuckles white as I gripped the counter for support. The scratching grew louder, more frantic. And then the voice came again, but this time it was different. It was my voice. "Mark, is that you? I'm scared." It was a perfect mimicry of my own voice, filled with a fake, trembling fear. It was trying to lure him. It knew he was outside. It was trying to get him to come to the door, to open it. I wanted to scream a warning, but my throat was tight with terror. The scratching stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was worse than any noise. I waited, every nerve in my body screaming. Then, from the front of the house, I heard the familiar sound of the front door opening. "Back? I'm back." It was Mark's real voice this time, warm and familiar. Relief washed over me so intensely my knees buckled. He walked into the kitchen, a confused look on his face. "Why are all the lights on? And why do you look so pale?" Before I could answer, he glanced down at the back door. His eyes widened. "What on earth?" I followed his gaze. There, on the floor, was a thin line of dirt and grime pushed under the door, and next to it, a single long black feather. Mark looked from the feather to my face, the confusion shifting to a dawning horror. He knew the stories too. We both did. That night, neither of us slept. We sat in the living room with every light on, a shotgun resting across Mark's lap, listening to the sounds of the night. We heard it circling the house. The soft thud of footsteps that were too heavy for any animal I knew. The scrape of claws against the siding, and the voices. It cycled through them all night. It used Mark's voice, begging me to come outside. It used my voice, crying for help. It even tried to mimic the sound of our old dog, Buster, who had passed away a year ago, whining and scratching at the door. Each sound was a calculated, cruel attempt to break us, to make us slip up. But we held firm, anchored by our shared terror. We didn't speak. We just sat and listened as the thing outside our walls taunted us, reminding us that it was there, that it was patient, and that it knew we were inside. The sun has never looked as beautiful as it did the next morning. We didn't even talk about it. As soon as the light was strong enough, we started packing. We took only what we could fit in the truck. We didn't look back at the farmhouse, at the life we had built there. We just drove. We've been gone for a few years now. We live in the city, surrounded by the noise and lights and people. It feels safer here, buffered by concrete and steel. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, I'll wake up with my heart pounding, convinced I can hear a faint scratching at the window. And Mark, he's never said a word about it since we left. But I see the way he checks the locks over and over before we go to bed. We never spoke of what happened, but it lives between us, a silent shared memory. We escaped, but I know we didn't really get away. Something like that, it doesn't just let you go, it remembers you. And sometimes I wonder, on quiet nights when the city hums itself to sleep, if it's still out there, waiting, practicing my voice. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. Stay safe out there.
The snow is a liar. It looks pure like a clean slate, but it buries things. It hides the trails, muffles the sounds, and sometimes it hides the monsters. My name is Sam, and I run KWOLF Radio out of a tiny cabin station nestled deep in the northern woods of Minnesota. My show, The Midnight Howl, is usually just me, my records, and the occasional lonely trucker calling in for a chat. But one night, the snow wasn't just falling. It was a blizzard, a white wall sealing me off from the world, and that's when the calls started. The first one came in just after 1 a.m. The line crackled with static, a sound like frozen branches scraping against a window. A man's voice, thin and strained, whispered through the interference. Is Is anyone there? You're on the air with the Midnight Howl, I said, my usual smooth radio voice feeling a little hollow in the storm. What's on your mind, caller? I'm lost, he stammered. My car went off the road. The snow. It's so deep, and I'm so hungry. I felt a pang of concern. This was serious. Where are you, friend? What mile marker are you near? I can call the state troopers. There was a long pause, filled only by that strange, scratching static. No troopers, he finally said. They wouldn't understand. The hunger is changing. The line went dead. Primera. Hua. I tried to convince myself it was a prank. Some local kids messing with the new guy. I played a few old rock songs. Trying to fill the dead air with something other than my own unease. An hour later, the phone rang again. Same number. I hesitated before picking up. Cave-Ove, you're on the air. The voice was different this time. Deeper, rougher, like gravel being ground under a boot. The static was worse, too, now punctuated by a wet, clicking sound. Still here, the voice rasped. The hunger, it's not for food anymore. I saw a deer. It didn't run. It just watched me, a chill that had nothing to do with the blizzard snake down my spine. Listen, man, this isn't funny. People are probably looking for you. Let me help. A sound that might have been a laugh, but sounded more like bones breaking, echoed down the line. Help. No one can help. It's too late. The cold doesn't bother me now. And the smell of living things on the wind. It's intoxicating. He wasn't whispering anymore. There was a confidence, a predatory edge to his words that made the hair on my arms stand up. The call ended abruptly, just like before. I locked the door to the broadcast booth, a pointless gesture. I knew. The station was just a wooden box in the middle of a vast, frozen wilderness. I looked out the window, but all I could see was the swirling vortex of white. Was he out there? Watching me? The hours crawled by. Every gust of wind sounded like a footstep. Every creak of the old cabin sounded like a nail being drawn across wood. I tried to keep the show going, my voice trembling as I introduced songs I could uneven hear over the pounding of my own heart. The third call came just before dawn. I almost didn't answer. My hand shook as I reached for the receiver. The static was gone. In its place was a low, guttural breathing, punctuated by the same wet, clicking noise, louder now. I didn't say my call sign. Here's the way that I can smell you, a voice growled. It was barely human. It was a long, drawn-out sound, like an animal testing the air, warm, in your little wooden box. You sound delicious. Who are you? I whispered, my throat tight with terror. A long, chilling scrape echoed down the line. It sounded like it was right outside the wall, like claws on wood. I don't remember. The voice rasped, the words stretched and distorted. I'm just the hunger, the long, lonely hunger of the snow. And I'm so very, very close now. Then I heard something new, something that wasn't coming through the phone, a faint, rhythmic sound from outside. A scratching, a slow, deliberate scratching on the station door. I dropped the phone. It dangled by its cord, the monstrous breathing still emanating from the earpiece. The scratching stopped. It was replaced by a new sound, a low, resonant thud against the door. And another. And another. Something was trying to get in. I scrambled back from the console, my eyes glued to the shivering wood of the door. Through the phone, the voice spoke one last time. No longer a voice, but a horrifying symphony of clicks, growls, and something that sounded like a distorted mimicry of my own broadcast name. Midnight Howl. Then the line went dead, but the pounding on the door only grew louder, stronger, more desperate. The blizzard raged outside, But the real storm was right here, trying to break its way in. I'm still in here. The sun is coming up, but the pounding hasn't stopped. I'm broadcasting this on a loop. If you're hearing this, don't come looking for me. Don't drive the lonely roads when the snow falls, because the snow is a liar. And sometimes, what it buries doesn't stay buried. It just gets hungry. The desert air in Utah is different. It's thin, dry, and carries sounds for miles. I learned this the hard way during a solo hike through a remote canyon, a place the locals told me to avoid after sunset. They didn't say why. They just gave me a look that said more than words ever could. I, of course, being young and arrogant, shrugged it off. Primera ade, my gear, plenty of water, and a good map. What could possibly go wrong? The first few hours were bliss. The sun painted the red rock formations in shades of orange and gold. The silence was profound, broken only by the crunch of my boots on the gravel trail and the occasional cry of a distant hawk. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. But as the sun began to dip below the canyon rim, casting long, distorted shadows, that peace started to fray at the edges. A chill crept into the air that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. That's when I saw him, or what I thought was a him, far down the trail, maybe a quarter of a mile ahead. A figure was walking, but something was immediately, fundamentally wrong. He was walking backwards. His movements were jerky, unnatural, like a film being played in reverse. He was dressed in what looked like tattered hiking clothes, but his head was craned over his shoulder, facing my direction. Even from that distance, I felt his gaze lock onto me. A cold dread, heavy and suffocating, settled in my stomach. I froze, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. Every instinct screamed at me to turn and run, but my feet were rooted to the spot. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a prank. Some locals trying to scare the tourists. Or perhaps someone was injured, disoriented. I cupped my hands around my mouth and shouted, "Hey! Are you okay? Do you need help?" The wind seemed to swallow my voice, carrying it away into the vast emptiness of the canyon. The figure didn't respond. It just kept coming, walking backwards, its head still fixed on me. The pace was slow, deliberate. Yet it was closing the distance faster than seemed possible. As it got closer, I could make out more details. The clothes were not just tattered, they were shredded, hanging off a frame that was disturbingly gaunt. The skin on its face was pulled taut over the bones, giving it a skeletal appearance. And the eyes were just dark, empty socket. I finally broke free from my paralysis. I spun around and started running, not just jogging, but a full-blown panic-fueled sprint back the way I came. I didn't dare look back. I could hear the scuffing of its feet on the trail behind me, a steady, rhythmic sound that was getting closer. Then, I heard a voice. It was a high, thin whisper that seemed to come from right behind my ear, even though I knew the figure was still yards away. It was my own voice, whispering, "Don't run." It's no use. My blood ran cold. How could it know my voice? I risked a glance over my shoulder. The thing was closer now. Much closer. It was still walking backwards, but its speed had increased dramatically. Its limbs moved at impossible angles, contorting in ways a human body shouldn't. It wasn't human. I knew that, with a certainty that terrified me to my core. This was something else. Something ancient and malevolent. Then the whispers changed. It started mimicking other sounds. The cry of the hawk I'd heard earlier, but distorted, nightmarish. The sound of my own heavy breathing, amplified and echoing around me. Then it mimicked the voice of my mother, a voice I hadn't heard in years, calling my name with a sweet, desperate plea. "Come back, honey. It's okay. Come back to me." Tears streamed down my face as I ran, my lungs burning. The trail was becoming harder to see in the gathering dusk. I stumbled over a loose rock, crashing hard onto the gravel. Pain shot up my leg. I scrambled to get up, my hands raw and bleeding. The scuffing sounds stopped. Primera looked back, and it was standing right there, maybe 20 feet away. It tilted its head, a motion that was grotesquely bird-like. And then it spoke again, this time in a voice that was a horrifying chorus of every sound it had mimicked. The hawk, my own panting, my mother's plea, all woven together into a single, guttural phrase. I have your voice now. I have your face. As it spoke, its featureless face began to shift and ripple. The skin stretched and contorted, slowly, agonizingly, forming a perfect, horrifying replica of my own. My eyes, my nose, my mouth. It was looking at me with my own face. I screamed, a raw, primal sound of pure terror. I crawled backwards, away from the abomination wearing my face. It took a step towards me. A normal step this time. Forward. It smiled with my mouth, but the smile was all wrong. It was a predator's grin, full of hunger and ancient evil. It raised a hand, and its fingers elongated into thin, sharp talons. Just as it lunged, my hand brushed against something cold and metallic on my belt. My multi-tool. Without thinking, I fumbled it open, the small flashlight attachment clicking on. I pointed the beam of light directly into its mephis. The creature recoiled with a shriek that was not human. It was a sound of scraping rock and tearing fabric. It shielded its stolen face with its elongated hands, stumbling backwards, resuming its unnatural, reversed walk. It retreated into the darkness, the sound of its whispers and the scuffing of its feet slowly fading into the canyon's oppressive silence. I didn't wait. I got to my feet, ignoring the searing pain in my leg, and ran. I ran until the canyon walls gave way to open desert, until I saw the distant lights of the town. I never looked back. I reported it, of course. The sheriff listened patiently, his face unreadable. When I finished, he just nodded slowly and said, "Some things in the desert are best left alone. You're lucky it only wanted your voice." I never went back to that canyon. Sometimes, at night, when the wind howls just right, I think I can hear it, a faint whisper in my own voice, carried on the breeze from the Utah desert. And I know, somewhere out there, a part of me is still walking backwards in the dark. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've ever had a strange encounter in the wild, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more Tales from the Shadows. Stay safe out there. The Northern Lights. They're a spectacle, right? A celestial ballet of greens and purples dancing across the Arctic sky. For me, Elias, a photographer obsessed with the aurora, it was more than a spectacle. It was a calling. I'd spent weeks in a remote cabin deep in the Alaskan wilderness, waiting for the perfect solar storm, the kind of storm that makes the sky explode with color. One night, it happened. The forecast promised a G5 geomagnetic storm, the strongest kind. The air crackled with energy, and the sky began to shimmer with an intensity I'd never seen before. I set up my gear on a frozen lake, the ice groaning under my boots. The aurora was breathtaking, a curtain of light so vivid it felt tangible. I was clicking away, lost in the moment, when I reviewed a long exposure shot on my camera's small screen, and that's when I saw it. Amidst the swirling greens, there was a silhouette, tall, unnaturally thin, with limbs that seemed too long for its body. It was just a dark shape against the light, almost like a trick of the eye, a shadow cast by a non-existent tree. I dismissed it as a photographic anomaly, a lens flare, or maybe just my sleep-deprived mind playing tricks on me. I packed up, feeling a strange, unshakable chill that had nothing to do with the freezing air. The next night, the aurora returned. Not as strong, but still beautiful. I went back to the same spot, half hoping to debunk my own foolish fear. I set up my camera, my heart pounding a little faster than usual. As the lights began their dance, I took another series of long exposure shots. I checked the screen, my breath catching in my throat. The figure was there again, but this time, it was closer. It was no longer a vague silhouette in the distance. I could make out more detail. The impossibly long arms, the gaunt frame. It was standing at the edge of the woods, just beyond the frozen lake. It was as if it had stepped out of the aurora and into my world. Panic started to bubble up inside me. This wasn't a lens flare. This was something real. I quickly packed my equipment, my hands fumbling with the frozen clasps. I didn't look back towards the woods. I just ran, the crunch of my boots on the snow sounding like thunder in the dead silence of the night. Back in the cabin, I locked the door, my mind racing. What had I seen? I spent the rest of the night huddled by the fire, jumping at every creak of the old wooden cabin, every howl of the wind. The following days were a torment of indecision. Part of me screamed to pack my bags and leave this cursed place. But the photographer in me, the part that chased beauty and mystery, was captivated. I had to know what it was. I spent the day researching local folklore on my spotty satellite internet. The stories I found were unsettling. Tales of an ancient spirit, a creature born of hunger and cold, that stalked the northern forests. They called it the Wendigo. The legends said it could mimic sounds, move with impossible speed, and that its presence was a harbinger of famine and despair. The descriptions matched the gaunt, elongated figure from my photos with terrifying accuracy. That night, the aurora was predicted to be even more powerful. A mix of terror and morbid curiosity pulled me back to the lake. This time, I didn't go alone. I brought my high-powered telephoto lens and a heavy-duty flashlight. I told myself it was for a better picture, but I knew it was for a sense of security. I set up my tripod further back, closer to the relative safety of the tree line. The sky lit up, and the world was bathed in an eerie green glow. I scanned the edge of the woods where I'd seen it last. Nothing. A wave of relief washed over me. Maybe it was gone. I turned my lens back to the sky, capturing the celestial show. After about an hour, I decided to review my shots. As I scrolled through the images, my blood ran cold. In the first few photos, the shoreline was empty. But then, in the subsequent shots, taken only minutes apart, the figure appeared. It wasn't at the edge of the woods anymore. It was on the ice, halfway across the lake. Each photo showed it closer, its form more defined. It wasn't walking. It was just there, appearing nearer in each frame, as if it was teleporting across the frozen expanse. Its head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and even from that distance, I could feel its gaze locked onto me. That was Italiano. Primera Hua es done. I grabbed my camera and tripod and sprinted back to the cabin without a second thought. I didn't even bother packing my other equipment. I threw my essentials into my truck, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the key in the ignition. As the engine roared to life, my headlights cut through the darkness, sweeping across the path, leading away from the cabin. For a split second, the beams illuminated a figure standing at the edge of the road, just beyond the reach of the cabin's light. It was tall, skeletal, with skin the color of ash. Its eyes seemed to glow with a faint, malevolent light of their own. It just stood there, watching me. I slammed my foot on the gas, the truck skidding on the icy road as I sped away. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. Primera Corriente. I drove for hours, not stopping until the sun came up and the familiar signs of civilization began to appear. I never went back for the rest of my gear. It can stay there, a tribute to the thing on the ice. I still have the photos. Sometimes, late at night, I pull them up on my computer. I zoom in on the figure, trying to make sense of what I saw. Each time, I notice something new, something more terrifying. The way its limbs seem to bend at impossible angles. The hint of something that looks like antlers sprouting from its head. But the worst part is the final picture, the one I took right before I ran. When I zoom in on the face, on the dark, empty sockets where eyes should be, I can almost see my own reflection. They say the Wendigo is a spirit of insatiable hunger. I used to think that meant a hunger for flesh, but now I know better. It's a hunger for warmth, for life, for the very soul. It's all my obsession, my hunger to capture the perfect light, and it recognized a kindred spirit. The aurora wasn't just a beautiful backdrop. The legends say the lights are spirits of the dead. I believe it now. The aurora was a warning. It was showing me what was coming for me, what was stepping out of the light and into the dark. I escaped, but a part of me feels like it's still out there, on that frozen lake, waiting. And some nights, when the sky shimmers with a faint green glow, I can feel its cold, hungry gaze, even from 1,000 miles away. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to follow for more stories. Stay safe out there. It was just past midnight in our Tucson home. The kind of quiet that feels heavy, you know. Primera wa, ese aplate working on my laptop in the living room. Our backyard is mostly desert landscaping sand, rocks, a few hardy cacti. It's all visible through the big glass sliding door. I'd been staring at the screen for hours. So Primera looked up, stretching my neck, and glanced outside. That's when I saw it. At first, my brain didn't really register what I was looking at. It was just a shape. A dark silhouette against the pale sand, crouched near the old mesquite tree at the far end of the yard. My first thought was, it was a coyote. We get them a lot here, but this was wrong. It was too big, too hunched over. I squinted, leaning closer to the glass. The thing was completely still. It looked like it was digging at the base of the tree with long, spindly limbs. It wasn't a coyote. The posture was all wrong. It was on two legs, but bent over in a way that just wasn't human. My heart started to thud against my ribs, a slow, heavy beat. I told myself it was just a trick of the light, my tired eyes playing games. Maybe it was just a strangely shaped bush I'd never noticed before. I stood up slowly, trying not to make a sound, and crept towards the door for a better look. The air in the house suddenly felt cold, and the silence from outside was no longer peaceful. It was menacing. As I got closer, the details started to come into focus. The moonlight cast just enough light to see its form more clearly. It was emaciated, its skin stretched taut over a bony frame. The limbs were impossibly long and jointed at odd angles. It had a narrow head, and even from this distance, I could see it was almost hairless, with just a few dark tufts on its scalp and back. It was still digging, its long fingers scraping at the hard-packed dirt. A primal fear, something deep and ancient. Wasedo per mí. This wasn't an animal. This wasn't a person. This was something else entirely. My hand was on the door lock, my mind screaming at me to lock it, even though it already was. Then, it stopped digging. It froze, its whole body rigid. Slowly, ever so slowly, it began to straighten up. It rose to its full height, and it was tall. Much taller than any person I'd ever seen. It must have been at least 7 feet. Its head turned, a jerky, unnatural movement, scanning the yard. And then its gaze landed on the house, on me. I couldn't see its eyes, just two dark hollows in its face. But I felt them. I felt it see me, standing there, silhouetted by the light from the living room. We were locked in this silent standoff for what felt like an eternity, though it was probably only a few seconds. The world just stopped. My blood ran cold, and I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The sheer terror of that moment is impossible to describe. It's a feeling that bypasses your brain and hits you right in the soul. It's the feeling of being prey. The creature's head tilted slightly, as if it was curious, or maybe sizing me up. Its mouth, a thin, lipless slash across its face, opened slightly. It didn't make a sound, but I swear I could hear a faint, dry clicking noise, like insects rubbing their legs together. My mind was racing, trying to process what I was seeing, trying to find a rational explanation. A prank. Costume. But no, the way it moved, the way it was built, it was real. This thing, this nightmare, was standing in my backyard. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it moved. It didn't walk or run. It unfolded. Its long legs bent backwards, and it dropped onto all fours in a fluid, horrifying motion. The speed was unbelievable. In a single bound, it leaped over our 6-foot cinder block wall and vanished into the darkness of the desert beyond. There was no sound, no thud, no scrape of claws on stone. It was just there 1 second, and gone the next. The only evidence it had ever been there was the disturbed dirt at the base of the mesquite tree and the lingering image of its gaunt, terrifying form burned into my memory. I stood there, shaking, for I don't know how long. My forehead pressed against the cold glass of the door. My heart was a drum solo in my chest. I finally stumbled back and sank onto the couch, pulling a blanket around me even though I wasn't cold. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every rustle of leaves, every creak of the house sent a fresh wave of panic through me. I just kept replaying the moment its head snapped towards me, The feeling of its unseen eyes boring into mine. That look wasn't one of aggression. Not exactly. It was more like recognition. Like we were two things that shouldn't have seen each other, and now that we had, a terrible line had been crossed. The next morning, as soon as the sun was fully up, I forced myself to go outside. My hands were trembling as I unlocked the sliding door. The air was warm and smelled of dust and creosote. Just a normal Tucson morning. Everything looked ordinary, but when I walked over to the mesquite tree, my stomach dropped. The ground was clawed up, just as I'd seen. There were deep gouges in the dirt, and strange tracks all around the area. They weren't animal prints, and they weren't human footprints. They were long and narrow, with impressions that looked like talons at the tips. They were the prints of something that should not exist. I haven't felt safe since I keep the blinds closed at night. I've installed motion sensor floodlights all around the property. But it doesn't help. Every time they flick on, my heart leaps into my throat. Is it just a rabbit, or is it Bike? I can't shake the feeling that it knows where I live, that our encounter wasn't an accident. Why was it in my yard? What was it digging for? These questions haunt my waking hours and fuel my nightmares. I don't know what I saw that night, not for sure. The old stories from this land speak of skinwalkers, of beings that can take on other forms, beings that stalk the night. I never believed in them. I thought they were just campfire tales. But now I know the desert holds secrets far older and darker than we can imagine. And sometimes, those secrets come into your backyard. I saw it. It saw me, and I have a terrifying feeling that this is far from over. Thanks for listening, and please, be careful out there. You never know what's watching from the dark. The old library was my sanctuary, a fortress of silence and paper against the screaming winds of the Minnesota winter. I was the archivist, the keeper of forgotten stories. Most days, my biggest challenge was deciphering faded 19th century handwriting, but that changed the day the donation box arrived. It was an unmarked wooden crate left on our doorstep, half buried in a snowdrift. Inside, beneath a pile of moth-eaten blankets, was a single leather-bound journal. It was old, the leather cracked and brittle, but the pages inside were strangely well preserved. The handwriting was a frantic scrawl, the ink sometimes smudged as if by a trembling hand. The author, a man named Elias Dorn, described himself as a trapper who lived in the deep woods, not far from where our town now stood. His early entries were mundane notes on animal tracks, the depth of the snow, the scarcity of game. But then, the tone shifted. He wrote of a growing unease, a feeling of being watched from the tree line. He mentioned the wind carrying whispers that sounded almost like his name. I shivered, pulling my cardigan tighter. It was just a story, but I told myself a very effective one. Elias wrote about the disappearances. First, a neighboring trapper, then a small group of loggers. The official word was that they got lost in a blizzard, but Elias knew better. He described finding their camps deserted, with food still simmering over the fire, but no signs of a struggle, just an unnerving silence and a strange, sickly sweet smell hanging in the frozen air. Then came the first mention of the name, Wendigo. He wrote it with a shaky hand, the letters darker than the rest, as if he'd pressed the pen down with all his might. He described it not as a monster, but as a plague, a curse born of starvation and desperation. It was a spirit of the lonely winter, a hunger that could never be filled. It could mimic voices, luring you into the woods. It was tall, emaciated, with skin the color of ash pulled tight over its bones, and its eyes burned with a cold, blue light. My heart was pounding now. The descriptions were so vivid, so terrifyingly real. I felt the chill of that winter seeping into the climate-controlled archive room. Elias wrote that the creature was stalking him. He would see its impossibly tall figure moving between the trees at dusk, a gaunt silhouette against the snow. He heard scratching at his cabin door at night, a sound like dry branches scraping against wood. He stopped leaving his cabin after dark, barricading the door and windows, rationing his meager supplies. His entries grew more sporadic, more desperate. He was running out of food. The hunger gnawed at him, a constant, dull ache. He wrote about the temptation, the dark thoughts that whispered to him in the silence. The Wendigo wasn't just outside anymore. Its influence was seeping through the walls, poisoning his mind. He was terrified of what he might become, he wrote. The greatest fear is not being eaten by the monster, but becoming it. I had to put the journal down. My hands were shaking. I walked to the window and looked out at the blizzard raging outside. The snow was coming down so thick it was like a white curtain, erasing the world. The wind howled, and for a terrifying second, I thought I heard a voice in it. A faint, drawn-out whisper. I shook my head, laughing at my own foolishness. I was letting a 100-year-old ghost story get to me. I went back to the desk, determined to finish it. The last few pages were almost illegible. The writing was a chaotic mess of crossed-out words and desperate pleas. Elias wrote that his food was gone. The hunger was unbearable. He could hear the creature circling his cabin constantly now, its whispers promising an end to his suffering. It was calling his name, Aubert, and Aubert. He knew he couldn't hold out much longer. He was weakening, and the cold was relentless. Then I got to the final entry. It was just a few lines, written with surprising clarity, as if in a moment of calm resignation. It read, "The snow is too deep. The hunger is too strong. It is at the door. I can see its eyes through the crack. Oh, God, they are so cold." That was it. The rest of the page was blank. I closed the journal, my breath catching in my throat. What a horrifying end. A man, alone, succumbing to a legendary terror. I sat there for a long time, the silence of the library pressing in on me. I felt a profound sadness for Elias Thorne, a man whose final moments I had just witnessed. As a professional archivist, my next step was to catalog the journal. I opened it again to the first page to record the start and end dates of the entries, and that's when I saw it. That's when my blood ran cold, and the story went from a historical curiosity to a living nightmare. The first entry was dated November 12th. The final entry, the one where he saw the creature's eyes, was dated February 17th. I looked at the calendar on my desk. Today's date was January 20th. I stared at the journal, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. The final, terrifying entry in this century-old journal was dated for next month. It hadn't happened yet. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. A prank, a very elaborate, cruel joke. But who would go to such lengths? The journal was authentically old. The paper, the ink, the binding. I was an expert in this. It was real. I flipped through the pages again, my hands trembling violently. The dates were consistent throughout. It wasn't a mistake. A loud crash from the other side of the library made me jump out of my skin. It was probably just a pile of books toppling over, but in that moment, it sounded like a door being forced open. I was alone. The library had closed hours ago due to the worsening storm. The snow was now so high it was pressing against the tall, arched windows of the archive. We were completely cut off. I stood up, my legs feeling like lead. I had to get out. I grabbed my coat and keys, my eyes darting nervously around the dimly lit room. The rows of shelves seemed to stretch into infinity, filled with shadows that danced and twisted in my peripheral vision. I thought of Elias Thorne, barricaded in his cabin. I suddenly understood his terror. As I reached the door of the archive, I heard a sound. A faint scratching. It was coming from the main library entrance. Scratch. Scrape. Like long, dry fingernails dragging across the heavy oak doors. My heart hammered against my ribs. It's the wind, I told myself. Just branches scraping against the building. But it was a steady, rhythmic sound. A deliberate sound. Then I heard the whisper. It was faint, carried on the wind that rattled the window panes, but it was unmistakable. It was a long, sibilant whisper that sounded like my name. The journal wasn't a history, it was a prophecy. A warning! I backed away from the door, my eyes wide with terror. I was trapped, the winter archivist, locked in my sanctuary, with a story that was coming to life. And according to the journal on my desk, My story was just beginning. The final entry was dated February 17th, and the hunger was just starting to set in. I've been on countless search and rescue missions in the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest, but none of them haunt me like the one from last fall. We got a call about a hiker, a young man named Alex, who'd been missing for 2 days on the notoriously confusing Blackwood Trail. The weather was turning, a thick, cold fog rolling in, making visibility almost zero. It was the kind of fog that swallows sound, making the forest feel dead and empty. We split into teams. My partner, Dave, and I took the western ridge, a section known for its treacherous terrain and sudden drop. Hours passed, filled with nothing but the crunch of our boots on damp leaves, and our calls for Alex echoing into the void. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, but the forest floor was already pitch black. We were about to call it a night when we heard a faint cry for help. It was weak, raspy, but it was definitely a human voice. We followed the sound, our flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness. We found him huddled at the base of a massive, ancient cedar tree. It was Alex. He was pale, shivering, and his eyes were wide with a kind of terror I'd never seen before. He was wearing just a thin jacket, completely soaked through. "Thank God you found me," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I got so lost. Something's out here." Dave checked him for injuries. Miraculously, apart from being dehydrated and suffering from exposure, he seemed physically unharmed. But his mental state was a different story. He kept looking over his shoulder, flinching at every snap of a twig. Toldose. Been followed. He described a sound that wasn't quite an animal and not quite human. A clicking, chattering noise that seemed to come from all directions at once. We tried to calm him down, telling him it was probably just the forest playing tricks on him, that fear and exhaustion can make you see and hear things. He just shook his head, his eyes pleading. "No, you don't understand. It was watching me. It mimicked my name." That sent a shiver down my spine. We've all heard the old stories, the local legends the tribespeople whisper about, but you push them to the back of your mind on the job. We gave Alex some water and a thermal blanket and started the long trek back to base camp. The journey was tense. The forest, which usually felt familiar, now seemed menacing. Every shadow looked like a lurking figure. Every gust of wind sounded like a whisper. Alex was quiet for most of the walk, but his fear was contagious. He'd occasionally stop dead, his head snapping around, listening intently. "It's still here," he'd mutter. "It's following us." Dave and I would scan the trees with our powerful flashlights, but we never saw anything. Just endless, dark woods. The air grew colder, and that strange clicking sound he'd mentioned. I swear I heard it once, far off in the distance. I told myself it was an insect or a bird. Dave said he heard it too. When we finally saw the lights of base camp, a wave of relief washed over us. The other teams were back, and the camp was buzzing with activity. We got Alex to the medical tent. Immediately, the medic, a seasoned professional named Sarah, started working on him. Dave and I went to debrief our supervisor, recounting the details of the rescue. We were in the middle of our report when a scream ripped through the quiet of the camp. It was Sarah from the medical tent. We all rushed over, our hearts pounding. We burst through the flap to a scene of chaos. The medical equipment was thrown around, the cot was overturned, and Sarah was backed into a corner, her face white as a sheet. But Alex was gone. The back of the tent was slit open, a gaping hole leading out into the blackness of the forest. "Where did he go?" our supervisor yelled. Sarah was trembling, unable to speak at first. She finally pointed a shaky finger towards the tear in the tent. "It wasn't him," she stammered. "I was checking his vitals, his eyes, they changed. And his voice. He asked me where the rest of the hikers were, the ones who get lost alone. But it wasn't his voice. It was deep, guttural. Then he just unfolded. That was the word she used. She said his limbs stretched, contorting in ways that weren't humanly possible. The joints popped and cracked, and his form shifted in the dim light of the lantern. Before she could even scream, he had sliced through the tent and vanished into the night. We organized a perimeter search immediately, but it was a futile effort. We were searching for something we didn't understand. The tracks we found leading away from the tent were strange. They started as boot prints, then morphed, the stride lengthening, the prints becoming deeper, larger, and ending in something that looked more like a canine's paw, but much, much bigger. The real horror set in the next morning. A call came over the radio from a ranger station miles away, near the park entrance. They had found a hiker. It was dazed, disoriented, and suffering from hypothermia, but alive. He said his name was Alex. He'd managed to find a small cave to shelter in after getting lost 2 days ago. He had no memory of being found by us. My blood ran cold. If the real Alex had been in that cave the whole time, who or what did we bring back to our camp? What did we lead out of the darkness? We rescued Italiano. We gave it warmth, water, and a safe escort out of the deep woods. It walked with us. It talked with us. It was studying us. I never went back to the Blackwood Trail. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I can still hear that faint, raspy voice calling for help in my mind. And then I hear the clicking sound, and I wonder what it's mimicking now, and who it's waiting for on that lonely trail. We didn't rescue a lost hiker that night. We were lured in. We were the bait, and we let a nightmare right into our world. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more terrifying encounters. Stay safe out there. The lake was a sheet of scarred, white bone under the bruised twilight sky. My name is Elias, and for 30 years, I've been an ice fisherman. It's a solitary life, one that teaches you the language of silence, the subtle groans of the ice, the sigh of the wind through skeletal pines. But this winter, the silence started speaking back in a way I'd never heard before. It began on the 3rd day of the deep freeze. I'd set up my shanty over my favorite spot, a deep trench where the lunkers liked to hide. The ogre bit into the ice, spitting out frozen confetti, and soon I had my line in the water. The sun was setting, painting the snow in shades of orange and purple. That's when I first saw it, a faint, greenish glow pulsing rhythmically from the black depths directly beneath my fishing hole. I leaned over, squinting. It looked like an old lantern, the kind my grandfather used, swaying gently as if held by an unseen hand in the current below. I told myself it was a trick of the light, maybe a reflection from my own headlamp, or some strange, phosphorescent algae. But the light had a warmth, a deliberateness that spooked me. I packed up early that night, the image of that submerged lantern burning behind my eyes. I didn't tell anyone back in town. Who would believe me? Old Elias is finally losing his marbles, they'd say. The next day, I returned, driven by a morbid curiosity I couldn't explain. The glow was there again, brighter this time, more insistent. It pulsed faster, almost like a heartbeat. I'd lowered my line, and the light would seem to draw closer to the surface, its glow intensifying, bathing the underside of the ice in an eerie jade. I felt watched. The familiar comfort of my shanty evaporated, replaced by a suffocating tension. The woods surrounding the lake, usually a backdrop of peaceful stillness, now seemed to be leaning in, their branches like grasping fingers. That night, the wind howled like a starving animal. It wasn't the usual winter gale. It had a voice, a mournful, guttural cry that seemed to call my name. I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the lantern, its light flickering in the darkness of my cabin. A hunger gnawed at me, not for food, but for something else. Something I couldn't name. It was a raw, primal craving that left me feeling hollow and cold from the inside out. By the 5th day, I was a wreck. I hadn't eaten, hadn't slept. The hunger was a constant, gnawing presence. I knew I shouldn't go back to the lake, that something was deeply wrong, but the pull was irresistible. The lantern was calling to me. When I arrived, the air was unnaturally still. No birds, no squirrels, just a profound, listening silence. I drilled my hole, my hands shaking. The moment the water was clear, The light flared up, brilliant and blinding. It wasn't just a lantern anymore. The light was emanating from something else. As my eyes adjusted, I saw a shape coalescing in the depths. It was tall, impossibly thin, its limbs elongated and twisted like frozen branches. It was pale, the color of old bone, and it looked hungry. Its head turned slowly, and I saw not a face, but a void. A hollow darkness where features should have been, and in the center of its chest, where a heart would be, was the source of the light, a glowing green orb that pulsed with that same sickening rhythm. Panic seized me. I stumbled backward, falling out of my shanty onto the ice. The thing under the water mirrored my movement, its long, spindly arm rising towards the hole. A sound cracked through the air, not from the depths, but from the shoreline. The crack of a twig. My head snapped towards the trees, and I saw it. Another one, standing at the edge of the woods, partially hidden by the pines. It was just as tall, just as skeletal. Its skin was mottled gray and tight over its bones, but this one had a face, or what was left of it. The flesh was peeled back from its teeth in a permanent, snarling grin, and its eyes were just black, sunken pits. It stood motionless, its head cocked to one side as if studying me. It wasn't the creature from under the ice. This was something else. A hunter. The true source of the dread I'd been feeling. Then I understood. The thing in the water, the lantern, it was bait. Allure. This thing, this Wendigo. It had been drawing me out, day after day, making me weak with hunger and fear. Isolating me. It had been playing with me. A low growl rumbled from its chest, a sound that vibrated through the ice and into my bones. It took a step out from the trees, its movements jerky but unnervingly fast. Its long claws, yellowed like old ivory, scraped against the bark of a tree as it moved. I scrambled to my feet, my mind screaming. The instinct for survival finally kicked in, overriding the paralysis of terror. I didn't grab my gear, my ogre, or my catch. I just ran. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, my lungs burning with the frigid air. I didn't dare look back. I could hear it behind me. Not the sound of footsteps, but a horrifying scraping, a slithering, as if it was pulling its emaciated frame across the ice. And above it all, a high, keening wail echoed across the lake, a sound of pure, insatiable hunger. It was the same sound the wind had made the night before. I burst from the tree line onto the old logging road, my heart hammering against my ribs. I didn't stop running until the lights of town were a welcome glow on the horizon. I never went back to that lake. I sold my shanty, my ogre, all of it. Sometimes, when the winter wind howls, I hear that voice, that cry of endless hunger, and when I close my eyes, I can still see it. Not the monster on the shore, but the thing under the ice, the glowing lure. The ice fishers, Lanto, patiently waiting in the dark, cold water for its next victim. It taught me the most important lesson of the frozen north. Some hungers can never be satisfied, and some depths are best left undisturbed. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales from the edge of the wild. Stay safe out there. The night air on Highway 89 is a special kind of lonely. As a state trooper, I've spent more nights than I can count, patrolling its desolate stretches. But nothing prepared me for what happened at the Sage Creek rest stop. It was just after 2 a.m., the kind of hour where the world feels like it's holding its breath. I pulled in for a routine check, the gravel crunching under my tires in the otherwise dead silence. The place was empty, a single, flickering lamp casting long, dancing shadows across the deserted picnic tables in the squat, concrete restroom building. I did my usual sweep. The parking lot was vacant, not a single car or semi in sight. I grabbed my heavy-duty flashlight and started my foot patrol, the beam cutting a sharp cone of light through the inky blackness. Everything seemed normal at first. The wind whispered through the sagebrush, carrying the faint, earthy smell of an approaching rain. I checked the men's restroom, first empty stalls, clean floors, nothing out of the ordinary. Then, I moved to the women's side. That's when the first odd thing happened. As I pushed the heavy metal door open, a sound from inside made me freeze. It was a soft rhythmic tapping. Tap, tap, tap. It seemed to be coming from the last stall. My hand instinctively went to my sidearm. "State Patrol," I called out, my voice sounding louder than I intended in the stillness. "Is anyone in there? We're closing the facilities for cleaning." The tapping stopped. Silence flooded the room, so thick I could feel it pressing in on me. I waited, listening, every nerve on high alert. Nothing. Maybe it was just a loose fixture, a pipe tripping. I pushed the stall door open. It was empty. I checked the small window high on the back wall. It was sealed shut. Shaking my head, I told myself I was just tired, my mind playing tricks on me. I stepped back outside, the cool night air a welcome relief. I was about to get back in my cruiser when I heard it again. This time, it wasn't tapping. It was a voice, a woman's voice, humming a tune. It was faint, almost carried away by the wind, but it was unmistakably coming from the men's restroom I had just cleared. My blood ran cold. I knew for a fact it had been empty just moments ago. Drawing my weapon this time, I cautiously approached the men's room door, pushing it open a crack. The humming was clearer now, a haunting, aimless melody that made the hairs on my arms stand up. It was a lullaby, but warped, dissonant. I swung the door open wide, flashlight beams sweeping across the stalls. Empty. Every single one. The humming stopped the instant the light hit the back wall. Now, I was genuinely spooked. This wasn't just my imagination. I backed out slowly, keeping my eyes fixed on the dark doorway, and radioed dispatch. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I'm at the Sage Creek rest stop. Got a possible 10 to 31. A disturbance. Something's not right out here." The dispatcher's calm voice was a comfort, but it felt a world away. She confirmed my location and told me backup was a good 40 minutes out. 40 minutes. Out here? It felt like an eternity. So I was talking. A flicker of movement caught my eye. Over by the picnic area, one of the heavy wooden tables scraped against the concrete. It moved just an inch, but it moved. There was no wind, not a breeze strong enough to shift something that heavy. My flashlight beam shot towards it. Nothing was there. Just the empty table, sitting innocently under the lone lamp. Then, from the darkness beyond the light's reach, came a sound that I will never forget. It was a cough, a dry, hacking cough, like that of a heavy smoker. But it was followed by a giggle, a high, childlike giggle that had no business being out here in the dead of night. The two sounds together were deeply unsettling. "Who's out there?" I yelled, my voice trembling slightly. "This is state property. Show yourself." The only answer was another sound, this time from the roof of the restroom building, the frantic scratching of claws on concrete. It was fast, scuttling from one end to the other. It sounded heavy, much heavier than any raccoon or coyote. I aimed my light up at the roofline, but the angle was wrong. I couldn't see a thing. The scratching stopped, and the pebbles skittered off the edge, landing on the pavement near my feet with a sharp click. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I started backing away toward my patrol car, never taking my eyes off the building. The air grew heavy, thick with a strange, metallic scent, like old blood and wet fur. And then the most terrifying thing of all happened. It happened all at once. The doors to all 6 bathroom stalls, 3 in the men's room, 3 in the women's, slammed shut with a single, deafening bung. The sound was so powerful it vibrated through the soles of my boots. It was impossible. I had just seen them all open. No person could have moved that fast, and the wind was dead calm. Before I could even process the sound, the doors slammed open again, in perfect unison. Slam shut. Slam open. Obera nobera violin, rhythmic percussion in the dead of night. Bang. 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 I didn't wait for another invitation. I scrambled into my cruiser, fumbling with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get them in the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I threw the car in reverse, tires spitting gravel. As I sped out of the rest stop, I risked a glance in my rearview mirror. In the faint, flickering light of the single lamp, I saw it. It was just for a second, a silhouette standing in the doorway of the men's restroom. It was tall, unnaturally so, and gaunt. Its limbs were too long, bent at angles that weren't human. It just stood there, motionless, watching me go. And as I tore back onto the highway, leaving the nightmare behind, I could still hear it. Even over the sound of my own engine, the faint, chilling echo of a warped lullaby carried on the night wind. I never stopped at Sage Creek again. Some places are better left alone, left to the things that own the darkness. Thanks for listening, and remember to subscribe for more stories. Stay safe out there. The hunger study began with such promise. Dr. Evelyn Allister, a brilliant mind in metabolic science, wanted to understand the absolute limits of human appetite. She chose a cabin deep in the snow-blanketed woods of northern Minnesota for complete isolation. The plan was simple. She would document her own physiological and psychological responses to prolonged fasting. Her only contact with the outside world would be a daily satellite phone check-in with her team back at the university. For the first week, everything was normal. Evelyn's voice, though growing weaker, was lucid. She detailed her plummeting blood sugar, the gnawing ache in her stomach, the strange clarity of thought that sometimes accompanied starvation. We, her colleagues, listened, transcribed, and worried. By day 10, her voice was a mere whisper, but her data was invaluable. Then, on day 12, the check-in changed. The call came at the usual time, but it wasn't Evelyn's voice. It was similar, yet different. Deeper, with a strange, resonant quality, like a voice echoing from the bottom of a well. It said, Day 12. Subject is stable. Te hongaris, manageable. We exchanged confused looks. We asked if Evelyn was okay, if she could come to the phone. The voice simply repeated, the subject is stable. The hunger is manageable. Then, the line went dead. The next day, the same thing. That deep, guttural voice, claiming to be Evelyn, delivering a clinical, detached report. We asked specific questions only Evelyn would know the answer to. Questions about her childhood pet, her doctoral thesis. The voice would pause, a long, unnerving silence stretching over the satellite delay, before answering with chillingly plausible, yet slightly off, details. It was like it was pulling the information from somewhere, guessing, learning. We tried to reason that extreme starvation was causing a psychological break, a form of disassociation, but it didn't feel right. By day 15, the reports became bizarre. The voice spoke of a new kind of hunger. Not for food, but for something else. It described the cold not as a discomfort, but as a comfort, a sharpening of the senses. It talked about the taste of the wind and the scent of distant, living things on the breeze. It said, the body adapts. The cravings shift. The old fuel is insufficient. A new fuel is required. The clinical tone was gone, replaced by something eager. Panic began to set in at the lab. We decided to send a team. The nearest town was a day's drive away, and then another half-day by snowmobile to reach the cabin. We contacted the local sheriff's department and a mountain rescue guide named Ben. We explained the situation, trying not to sound like we were losing our minds. To our surprise, Ben didn't question us. He just listened grimly and said, I'll get my gear. You folks, stay on the phone with her. Do not let her know we are coming. The next check-in was the worst yet. The voice was no longer trying to mimic Evelyn. It was a low growl, filled with a terrifying, inhuman resonance. It didn't wait for our questions. It said, the change is almost complete. The vessel is efficient. It moves without tiring. The cold is a friend. The hunger is a guide. It points north. Always north. We asked, what's north? There was a sound like dry branches snapping, followed by a low, airy chuckle that made the hair on our arms stand up. More fuel, it rasped. The forest provides for its own. We kept it on the line, our hearts pounding, feeding it useless questions to keep it occupied while Ben and the deputies made their way to the cabin. We could hear movement in the background now, a rhythmic, heavy scraping sound. It wasn't the sound of a person moving, it was something else. something heavy being dragged. Ben and the 2 deputies arrived at the cabin just before dusk. The snow was deep, undisturbed except for a single, unnerving trail leading away from the back of the cabin. The tracks weren't human. They were long and possibly narrow, as if made by something walking on the very edges of its feet, digging deep into the snow with each step. The cabin door was ajar, swinging gently in the wind. Inside, the place was a wreck. Furniture was overturned, and research papers were scattered everywhere. Evelyn's notes from the first 11 days were pristine, her handwriting precise. But on day 12, the writing changed. It became jagged, chaotic. The last entry, scrawled in a black marker that had bled through several pages, read, "IT's so hungry. IT wears my voice. IT wears my skin." Of Evelyn Allister, there was no sign. The satellite phone was on the floor, its screen cracked, but the most disturbing discovery was in the small pantry. The carefully rationed food supplies were untouched. Cans of soup, protein bars, dried fruit, all of it was there, covered in a thin layer of frost. Whatever had been in that cabin, whatever had been speaking to us, it hadn't been eating the food. Ben called us from his own satellite phone. His voice was strained, tight with a fear I'd never heard from a professional guide. He described the scene, the tracks leading away into the darkening woods. "There are stories up here," he said, his voice low. "Old stories about a hunger that never ends. A hunger that comes in the deep winter, when the game is scarce and people are isolated. A hunger that changes you." He told us the tracks headed north. Just as the voice had said, he and the deputies weren't equipped to follow them into the vast, freezing wilderness at night. They were turning back. There was nothing they could do. He warned us, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Don't go looking. What you're looking for, it isn't Dr. Allister anymore. And it's very, very hungry." We never heard from Evelyn again. The official report lists her as a missing person, presumed to have succumbed to the elements. But we know better. We have the tapes. We have 15 days of recordings that document a brilliant scientist's descent into something ancient and ravenous. Sometimes, late at night, in the lab, when the building is quiet, I listen to the last recording. I listen to that low, guttural voice, that airy chuckle. Am primera wanda, as it wonders the endless. Frozen north, if it still remembers her name. I wonder what it's hunting, and I pray it never finds its way south again. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. The first time it happened, I brushed it off. I was in the kitchen, making coffee the morning sun, barely peeking over the horizon. From the living room, clear as day, I heard my name. It wasn't a shout, just a calm, simple call. I figured my wife, Sarah, was up early and needed something. I walked into the living room, still half asleep. "Yeah, what's up?" I asked. But the room was empty. The couch was undisturbed, the curtains drawn tight. A faint, earthy smell, like damp soil after a rain, hung in the air, but I dismissed it as my imagination. Sarah was still sound asleep when I checked our bedroom. Weird, but I chalked it up to being tired. A few days later, it happened again. This time, I was out back, pulling weeds from the garden. "Daniel," the voice called, seeming to come directly from my study window. It sounded exactly like Sarah, but with a slight, almost imperceptible tremor to it, like she was cold. I stood up, wiping dirt from my hands. "Coming!" I yelled back. I walked inside, the screen door slamming behind me. The house was silent. I went to my study. The door was ajar, just as I'd left it. I pushed it open. Empty. The same damp, earthy smell was there, stronger this time. It clung to the back of my throat. I looked around, my heart starting to thump a little faster. Nothing was out of place. The books on my shelves, the papers on my desk. Everything was normal, except for the shadows. The late afternoon light was casting long, distorted shapes across the floor, but one shadow, in the corner by the bookshelf, seemed wrong. It was darker than the others, and it didn't seem to be cast by anything. It wavered and pulsed, like a living thing breathing in the gloom. I flicked on the light, and it was gone. Just a normal corner. I told myself I was just seeing things. That night, I mentioned it to Sarah. "Have you been calling me from other rooms?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She looked at me, confused. "No. Why would I do that?" I described the voice. "The empty rooms?" She laughed it off. "You're working too hard. Honey, your mind's playing tricks on you." Maybe she was right. I'd been under a lot of stress lately. But the voice didn't stop. It became a regular occurrence. Sometimes it was Sarah's voice. Sometimes it sounded like my brother, who lived 3 states away. Once, it even sounded like my father, who passed away years ago. That one chilled me to the bone. Each time, I'd follow the sound. And each time, I'd find an empty room. And always, that smell. Damp earth and something else, something wild and musky. And the shadows. They started appearing more frequently. Long, spindly shapes that stretched and contorted in ways that defied the light source. They'd flicker at the edge of my vision, gone the moment I turned to look directly at them. I started to feel like I was being watched, a constant, prickling sensation on the back of my neck. I'd be reading a book, and suddenly feel a cold spot in the room, a drop in temperature so sudden it would raise goosebumps on my arms. I'd look up, and in the reflection of the TV screen, I'd see a flicker of movement behind me, a tall, gaunt shape that would vanish when I spun around. Sarah started to notice my anxiety. I was jumpy, constantly looking over my shoulder. I stopped sleeping well, my nights filled with dreams of running through a dark forest, pursued by something with long limbs and glowing eyes that moved impossibly fast. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night. We were watching a movie. Sarah had fallen asleep on the couch, her head in my lap. The house was quiet, except for the low murmur of the television. Then I heard it, whispered directly into my ear. "Daniel." It wasn't Sarah's voice. It was a dry, rasping sound, like leaves skittering across pavement. It was so close, I felt a puff of cold, foul-smelling air against my skin. My blood ran cold. I froze. Every muscle in my body tensed. I didn't dare move. I slowly, carefully, turned my head. Nothing was there, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. My gaze drifted towards the darkened hallway that led to the bedrooms. En primera, W italiano. It wasn't just a shadow this time. It was a silhouette, standing just beyond the archway. It was tall, unnaturally so, stooped over as if its head was about to brush the top of the doorframe. It was thin, skeletal, with limbs that seemed too long for its body. It wasn't moving, just standing there, observing. I couldn't see any features. No face, no eyes, just a solid black shape against the lesser dark of the hallway. I felt a primal fear, a terror so absolute it rooted me to the spot. My breath caught in my chest. I wanted to scream, to wake Sarah, to run, but I couldn't move. My body wouldn't obey. The shape took a slow, deliberate step forward, its movements jerky and unnatural. It was like watching a marionette with a clumsy puppeteer. With each step it made a faint, dry clicking sound, like bones knocking together. The earthy, musky smell filled the room, thick and suffocating. It took another step, and another, slowly emerging from the hallway and into the dim light of the living room. It was then that I saw that its shape wasn't solid. It was shifting, wavering at the edges like smoke. The form was vaguely humanoid. But it was all wrong. The proportions, the way it moved. It was a mockery of a human being. It stopped about 10 feet from the couch, and then it spoke. It didn't open a mouth. It had no mouth to open. The sound just emanated from its center. The same dry, rasping whisper that had been in my ear. Daniel, it wasn't asking. It was stating it knew my name. Suddenly, Sarah stirred in her sleep, murmuring something. The creature flinched. It recoiled as if struck, its form dissolving and flowing backwards into the hallway with impossible speed. It didn't run. It just retreated like a shadow being swallowed by a greater darkness. In a blink, it was gone. The room was normal again. The oppressive feeling vanished. The foul smell dissipated. I sat there, shaking, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it would break. I gently shook Sarah awake. "What? What's wrong?" she asked groggily. I couldn't form the words. I just pointed a trembling finger towards the empty hallway. We stayed at a hotel that night. I tried to explain what I saw, but it sounded insane even to my own ears. A tall, shadowy figure that whispered my name. Sarah held my hand, told me I was having a panic attack, that the stress had finally gotten to me. She didn't believe me, not really, but she saw the genuine terror in my eyes. The next day, I called in sick to work and spent hours online, frantically searching for anything that could explain what was happening. Primera se ha reached, foreshadow person, voice imitation, unnatural movement. And that's when I found them. Stories, legends from Navajo folklore, tales of malevolent beings, shamans who had turned to dark arts, creatures that could mimic voices, take the shape of animals, and steal the forms of humans. They were called skinwalkers. The descriptions matched perfectly. The ability to mimic voices to lure victims. The unnatural, jerky movements. The association with a foul, animalistic smell. The stories said they were drawn to people, that they would stalk them, torment them, trying to wear them down to steal their identity, their skin. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't in my head. My house, my life, had been invaded by something ancient and evil. It had been learning about me, testing me, luring me with the voices of my loved ones. And now, it had shown itself. We never went back to that house. We packed what we could in one frantic afternoon and left. We broke the lease, lost our deposit, and moved hundreds of miles away. I know it sounds crazy. I know people will say I imagined it all, but I know what I saw. I know what I heard. Sometimes, late at night in our new apartment, when the wind howls just right, I think I hear a faint, rasping whisper carrying my name. And I wonder, did we really get away? Or is it just waiting, patiently, for me to let my guard down again? Thanks for watching. If you've had a similar experience, share it in the comments. Stay safe out there, and don't forget to follow for more stories. The Chequameganicolete National Forest in Wisconsin is a vast, ancient wilderness. For centuries, loggers have carved a living from its dense timber. But some stories, buried deep in the forest floor, are better left undisturbed. This is one of them. It was late autumn when a crew of modern loggers stumbled upon something impossible. Deep within an uncharted section of the forest, they found a 19th century logging camp. It wasn't a ruin. It was pristine. The log cabins stood strong against the elements, the doors slightly ajar. Axes were leaned against chopping blocks, their blades still sharp. Saws were laid across half-cut logs. Inside the cookhouse, tin plates and cups were set on a long wooden table, as if the loggers had just stepped out for a moment. It was a ghost camp, frozen in time, waiting for its inhabitants to return. Take crew boss, a man named Marcus, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. And soon, a team of historians and archaeologists arrived, buzzing with excitement. They documented everything. The camp, they determined, was abandoned around 1888. The most peculiar discovery was the camp's journal, found on the foreman's desk. The entries started normally, detailing daily logging operations, weather, and supplies. But then, the tone began to change. The foreman wrote of a biting hunger that swept through the camp. A hunger that food couldn't satisfy. Men grew gaunt and pale, their eyes wide with a desperate, animalistic craving. Fights broke out over rations, even though supplies were plentiful. They became paranoid, whispering about the wind, carrying a voice that promised to end their gnawing emptiness. The final entry was almost illegible, the handwriting a frantic scrawl. It spoke of a long-limbed shadow that stalked the edges of the camp at dusk. It was tall and impossibly thin, with grayish skin stretched tight over its bones. The foreman wrote that the men weren't just hungry anymore. They were becoming something else. He described one of his best loggers, a man named Thomas, whose teeth had grown long and yellow, his fingernails like claws. Thomas would stare into the forest for hours, muttering about the taste of raw meat. The last sentence in the journal was chilling. The hunger has a name. It walks on two legs. God save us. It's inside us now. It's calling them from the trees. After that, the journal went silent. The academic team tried to rationalize it. Mass hysteria, contaminated food, some unknown disease. But Marcus, the logger who found the camp, knew better. He'd grown up with the old stories, the ones the elders told around crackling fires. Stories of the Wendigo, the spirit of insatiable hunger, the eternal famine. He knew the camp wasn't just abandoned, it was cozy. As the research team packed up their findings for the day, a young archaeologist named Ben decided to stay a little longer. He wanted to get some twilight shots of the camp, as the sun dipped below the tree line, casting long skeletal shadows. The forests grew unnervingly quiet. Even the birds and insects fell silent. Ben was adjusting his camera when he heard it, a faint whisper on the wind, a sibilant sound that seemed to slither through the trees. It sounded like his name. Ben. He froze, his heart pounding against his ribs. He told himself it was just the wind, his imagination running wild after reading the journal. He turned back to his camera, but then he heard a twig snap behind him. He spun around. Standing at the edge of the clearing, partially obscured by the deepening gloom, was a figure. It was unnaturally tall and emaciated, its limbs long and stick-like. Its head was crowned with what looked like antlers, but they were jagged, like broken branches. Two pinpricks of icy blue light glowed where its eyes should be. It didn't move. It just watched him. A wave of primal fear washed over Ben. He couldn't scream. He couldn't move. He was paralyzed. The air grew frigid, and he could see his breath misting in front of him. Then, a new sensation began to creep in, starting from the pit of his stomach. Annoying, ravenous hunger. It was more intense than any hunger he had ever known. He felt his stomach clench in a painful knot, and his mind was suddenly filled with grotesque images of tearing flesh. He felt a desperate urge to run, not away from the creature, but towards it. The thing tilted its head, and a dry, rasping sound echoed through the forest, a grotesque imitation of a human voice. "So hungry," it whispered, the sound coming from all directions at once. Ben finally broke free from his paralysis. He scrambled backward, falling over a log, and crab walked away, never taking his eyes off the monstrous figure. He grabbed his radio, his fingers fumbling with the buttons. "Marcus, Comain. Marcus," he yelled, his voice cracking with terror. "It's here. It's real. It's in the camp." The radio crackled back to life. "Ben? What is it? What's happening?" It was Marcus's voice, strained with worry. Before Ben could answer, the creature moved. It didn't run. It flowed through the trees like smoke, covering the distance in an instant. One moment, it was at the edge of the forest. The next, it was looming over him. He saw its face then, a gaunt, skeletal mask of gray skin, with a lipless mouth stretched into a horrifying grin, revealing rows of pointed, yellow teeth. The stench of decay and frozen earth filled his nostrils. Marcus and the others heard Ben scream over the radio, a short, sharp cry that was abruptly cut off. Then, there was only static. They raced back to the camp, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. They found Ben's camera on the ground, its lens shattered. They found his radio lying in the dirt, but Ben was gone. There was no sign of a struggle, no tracks other than their own. It was as if the forest had simply swallowed him whole. They searched for days, but nothing was ever found. The academic team packed up and left, their scientific curiosity replaced by a deep, unspoken fear. The logging company officially declared the area unsafe and sealed it off, forbidding anyone from entering. The story was hushed up, dismissed as a tragic accident, a young man lost in the wilderness. But Marcus knew the truth. He knew that the hunger that consumed the loggers in 1888 was still there, waiting in the silent woods. He knew that the camp wasn't a historical site. It was a trap, a place where the Wendigo waits for new souls to feed its endless craving. The tools are still laid out. The plates are still set on the table, not for the loggers who vanished a century ago, but for the next unfortunate souls who stumble upon the camp, drawn in by a whisper on the wind and a hunger that can never be filled. The forest keeps its secrets, and sometimes those secrets are hungry. If you ever find yourself in the Chequameganagalet National Forest and you feel a sudden, gnawing emptiness inside you, a hunger that no food can satisfy, don't ignore it. Run. Because the Wendigo is not just a story, and it's always hungry. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more tales from the dark corners of the world. Stay safe out there. I drive a seasonal shuttle van for a state trail system, mostly early mornings and late afternoons when hikers need rides back from trailheads where overnight parking is restricted. It is quiet work, predictable. On September 22nd, I was assigned the last run of the day, a short loop down a Forest Service road to collect 2 solo hikers before dark. The sun was already riding low enough that the trees looked drained of color, their greens flattened into ash and gold. The shuttle itself was an older van, the kind with a stiff suspension and a dashboard worn smooth by years of sun. The backup camera was functional but temperamental, sometimes lagging by a second if you shifted too quickly. I had one passenger when we left the first trailhead, a woman named Laura who had been hiking since dawn and looked ready to fall asleep in place. Out of habit, I counted heads anyway. 1 in the front seat, none behind. I even glanced down the aisle before closing the door. The forest road narrowed as soon as we pulled away. Pines pressed in on both sides, their trunks forming vertical bars that slid past the windows. Dust hung low behind us, glowing in the sunlight. Laura stared out her window quietly, boots crossed, pack at her feet. The van rattled the way it always did, a familiar mechanical rhythm that made the isolation feel manageable. At the first turnaround, I slowed to reposition the van. The clearing was tight and uneven, and I wanted a clean angle for the next stretch. I pressed the brake and shifted into reverse. The backup camera clicked on automatically, its small screen glowing pale blue against the dash. Someone was sitting in the second row. They were directly behind my seat, upright and still, hands folded neatly in their lap. A seatbelt strap crossed their chest. Their head was turned slightly toward the window like a tired passenger watching trees pass. For a split second, my mind insisted it had to be a frozen frame from earlier, a glitch, but the image had depth. Wait. Shadows that matched the movement of the van. I turned around sharply. The second row was empty. Every row was empty. No one crouched, no one hidden. I could see all the way to the rear doors. I looked back at the screen. The figure remained, posture unchanged, as if it had never questioned its right to be there. Laura asked if something was wrong. I told her the camera was acting up. My voice sounded wrong to my own ears. Too careful. I shifted back into drive. The screen went black as expected. The van rolled forward and the trees closed in again, swallowing the clearing. For the next stretch of road, I drove in silence, refusing to look at the empty seats reflected in the mirrors. My thoughts chased explanations in circles. Ghost image. System delay. Reflection. But the figure had not been transparent. It had not flickered. It had waited. The second trailhead came into view sooner than expected. Another tight pull-off. Another need to reverse. My shoulders locked as my foot found the brake. I told myself not to check the screen. I told myself it would only make things worse. I shifted into reverse anyway. The screen lit up immediately. The figure was closer. It now sat directly behind my seat, leaning slightly forward as if interested in the road ahead. Its head had tilted toward the camera, though the face remained indistinct, smeared by resolution and shadow. One arm rested on the seat beside it. The fingers were too straight, too long, or maybe just distorted by perspective. It looked less like a person caught accidentally on camera and more like someone settling in. I turned and checked the cabin again. Nothing. Laura twisted around at the same time and confirmed the seats were empty. When she leaned forward to see the screen better, something happened that made my stomach turn. The figure leaned forward too, matching her motion but doing it a fraction of a second before she finished moving. Like anticipation rather than reaction. Laura went quiet. I felt sweat break out along my neck despite the cool air. I yanked the gear shift back into drive. Too hard. The van lurched. The screen went dark. Neither of us spoke after that. We pulled into the pickup spot without reversing again. 2 hikers waited near the trail sign, packs already on the ground. I stepped out of the van, relieved to be back in open air, though the feeling of being watched didn't fade. As the hikers loaded their gear into the rear compartment, I scanned the interior through the windows. All seats were empty. No indentations, no disturbed dust, no warmth lingering on the fabric. On the drive back, Laura moved behind me and took the second row seat despite the long day. She said she felt better there. I didn't ask why. The ride passed quietly, forest thinning as we approached pavement. When cell service returned, the tension didn't ease. At the drop-off, Laura lingered a moment before closing the door. She asked if the van ever did that before. Primera told, no. She nodded in a way that said she didn't believe me and walked toward her car without looking back. I returned to the depot just as the sun slipped behind the hills. I parked, shut off the engine, and sat in the quiet van longer than necessary. As I reached to gather my things, the backup screen flickered on by itself for half a second. The second row was empty, but in the reflection of the driver's side glass, something sat beside me. Upright, patient, facing forward like it had always belonged there. The screen went black again. I turned in my keys the next day and told them I wouldn't be finishing the season. I still dream about that van sometimes, about the camera waking up on its own, ready to show me who decided to ride along once I stopped counting heads.